Hi there, I'm Kathy Barker from Software Solutions, and I do hope you're enjoying these videos. Please like or subscribe so that we know whether we're doing good or not, and to keep pumping out these videos to help you. We are looking at Power BI and we're looking at reports and visualizations, and what I want to do now is I want to look at some year-on-year comparisons. And for this, I'm going to first of all duplicate one of our pages, and I've just randomly chosen out of this collection of 3 pages concerning net and freight. I've chosen the net and freight cumulative page. I'll right click this page, I'll duplicate page, which will save me a lot of development time. I'm going to double click this, and instead of calling it duplicate of, I'll choose net and freight, and I'm just going to call it net and freight movement. I'll then edit the text box and put movement in here as well. I then want to delete all the visuals that are on this page except for that text box. So I'll click on this table and I'll delete it, and I'll click on this chart and I'll delete that as well. What I want to do is add to this page a matrix. So I'm going to go to my visualizations, I'm going to choose matrix, and I'll just stretch this out a little bit. All right. So what do I want to see in my matrix? I want to do a year-on-year comparison. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually add year as my column. So I'm going to go straight for my date table, and I'll grab year and I'll drop that onto my matrix, and then I'll drop it into columns. So I've got my years now showing as columns. I actually want to show my months as rows. So I'm going to go to my date table, and in the M's I'll grab month and I'll put that into rows. So I've got my rows 1 to 12 for January to December down the side, and I've got my years across the top. And let me just zoom in on that so you can actually see more clearly what's going on. All right, and then what I want to do is grab net, which is a calculated column we made in an earlier video, which sits in my fact order details table, and I'm going to drop that into my values. So at the intersection of a row and a month, I have my net sales. Now I want to do a year-on-year comparison to know whether a year has gone up or down from the previous year. So I want to create a quick measure. I'm going to right click on my fact order details table and ask for a new quick measure. I'm going to go to my quick measure pane and select the calculation year over year change. Let's choose that option there. So the base value is the net value. So let's grab net and drop that onto here. The date I'm going to grab from my date table, which is this field here, and I'll drop it on here. And the number of periods, I just want to keep that as 1 and go add. Now when I scroll down and I look at my query, there's my net year on year, YO year percentage. I want to add that to my value, so I drag that and drop that into my values bucket. If I click below that, maybe click on quantity, it'll make the calculation disappear, so I'm not seeing the DAX calculation used to calculate the measure year on year. I'll just click on quantity, that'll make that go away. So what I'm seeing here is we didn't start this business until August 2019. So there was nothing for the previous year. But as soon as we reach the month of January and the year 2020, no, the month of August in the year 2020, we can see there was an 83.71% increase, 30,000 to 55,000 increase from last year. And I can see there was an increase from 26 in September 2019 to September 2020, which is an 87.83% increase. So we've got a year-on-year percentage increase showing now in our matrix. Now, something that's really helpful, I think, as well, is to apply conditional formatting. Let me just close the quick measure pane so I get more horizontal space here. If we go to the format visual, and we particularly go for the cell elements, which we can see here, and we scroll down and see icons, we can turn on the icons. When we turn this on, we're given a set of icons, but I want to go into this button here called conditional formatting to control the appearance and the basis on which an icon appears. So I click this button here. What I'd like to do here is basically say I want to create a custom set of conditional formatting. It's not to be applied to sum of net, it's to be applied to the query that contains the net year-on-year percentage. So I'm wanting to apply this conditional formatting to my year-on-year percentage change. I'm wanting to say that if a value is greater than or equal to, not a percent, in fact change all of these percentages to number, because percentages don't apply to what I'm wanting to do. If a value is greater than or equal to, let's say -100, then, and less than, say, 0, then I want it to show as a red triangle pointing downwards. So if a value is less than 0, show a red triangle because it's gone down. If a value is equal to 0, then I want to show a yellow minus, no change. If a value is blank, then I also want to show no change. And then I need a fourth rule. So we hit this button to add a new rule. And you can have as many rules as you need. So I've added a new rule, and now this final rule, I'll say if it's greater than 0, that is the number 0, and less than or equal to 100, then I want to see a green up triangle. There. So you can create your own conditional formatting, as many rules as you need, customize them, and apply them to a particular field. And when I go OK, what I'm seeing is where there's no change, which is the first year, there's a yellow dash, and where there's an increase, a green up triangle, and when there's a decrease on a previous year, we're seeing a down triangle. We can stretch this and resize this, and we've basically created our matrix with our year-on-year changes and our conditional formatting. Join me for the next video. In Power BI, we often want to do time comparisons. We want to compare years, much like the last video we just did with a year-on-year, but we also want to be able to compare months or days or quarters. I want to show you a function called same period last year, and also a function called date add. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a duplicate of the net and freight page. I'll click on the net and freight page, right click, duplicate the page, and what I want to call is sales analysis. So we'll call this page sales analysis. I'll take a copy of that and I'll edit the text box to also say sales analysis. And I'll make sure the font size remains at 18. Okay, we've got a new page, it's a duplicate. We've got sales analysis as our text box, and I want to delete all the other visuals except the text box. And I might zoom back a little bit. A quick way to zoom in and zoom out in Power BI, in fact any program for that matter, is to hold the control key and move your mouse wheel forward to zoom in and backwards to zoom out. So I'm just moving in a little bit. Now what I want to do is I want to create some measures, and I don't want to use a quick measure. I just want to create a quick measure by typing some DAX. So the first measure I want to create is for the fact order details table. I'll right click the fact order details and say new measure. And this is a simple measure where I want to create a measure called sales, and it's equal to the sum. So I press tab, and it is the sum square bracket of the net field. Now I could just choose net, but I'm going to be explicit, so I'm actually going to go single quote and say fact order details net. So there's no doubt about what column called net I want to work with, because there might be two. So I'll choose this particular reference with the tab key, close the bracket and press enter. So I've created a sales measure which is purely summing the net values in the query called fact order details. Now I want to calculate the same sales figures but for last year. So it's a relative time by time comparison. I right click Fact Order Details and I choose New Measure. I'm just going to call this measure Sales LY for last year equals. Now I want to use the calculate function. So I type calc and press tab. I want to calculate square bracket the sales. So I choose that, comma. And now I'm going to use the function same period last year. Choose this function, square bracket, and I want to choose the date field. Now it's not coming up with the actual date, so I'm going to backspace that and I'm going to go single quote and tell it that it's the date table and the date field. So you can see there, my table is called dim date table and my field is called date. Double click that or tab, and then close the bracket twice, which it's done, and I've created my sales and my sales last year. Now I also want to see the difference between these two figures, so let's make a third measure. Right click the table, new measure. I want to call this new measure sales diff year on year equals, and I simply want to grab the sales figure and subtract the sales last year figure. And that's all it is. And I'm just going to press enter. So we've created 3 measures in this query: sales diff last year on year, sales, and sales last year. Let's make a table and have a look at how this looks. So I'm going to insert a table. I'm going to grab year and drop that into my columns, or drop it on the table, whichever you prefer. Then I'm going to add sales under that, sales last year under that, and sales diff year on year under that. And let me just stretch this out. And so what we actually see is we see a breakdown by year. Let me just move that over. We see the year, we see the sales for that year. We see the following year they sold 631, but the year before, sales last year was 175, and the difference between those is 456. So you can ask for the same period last year, which happens to be a year, using the same period last year function. All right, let's do the same for month, but I'm going to do it slightly differently. Let's say I want to do a time comparison, not by year, but by month. I could actually create a calculation that uses the date add function. Okay, and we also call this measure branching. There is a term called measure branching, which is when you create a measure based on another measure. They call that measure branching. Okay, so I would like to add a table, and I would like to add month to the columns, and I would also like to add sales to the columns. So there's my month and there's my sales. Let's just move it and stretch it. 12 months. Okay, but now I'm going to create a measure that works out the sales for last month. So I right click my query and I create a new measure. I call it sales LM for last month. Oops, let me just fix my caps lock. Sales last month equals. Now I could use the same period last month, that's a function, or I could say calculate the sales, comma, and date add. Date add is another way. Date add, and I want to add it to the date field, so I'm going to go down and choose that, comma, -1, comma, and month. Notice you have the option of date add, go back 1, so that's what the -1 means, go back 1 day, go back 1 month, go back 1 quarter, or go back 1 year. So I'm just going back 1 month. So let's actually add this to our table. So sales last month can go into our table. Let's click on the table and drag it underneath. So what I'm seeing here is I'm seeing the sales for January is 128, then for February it's 152, but the sales last month was 128. Then it was 160 and the sales last month was 152. So you can use the same period last month, same period last year, or you can use the add date function for such things. Now I want to do a calculation that subtracts these two from each other. So I'm going to go right click, new measure, and I'm just going to create sales diff month on month. Oops. Sales diff month on month is equal to the sales field minus the sales last month. Enter. And then I'll add that to my table. And so I can see the difference each month. So time comparison is very good, and it can be done using the date add function, or it can be done using the same period last function. Now what I'd like to do is actually create a chart. So I'm going to click on the year table, Control C, Control V to copy paste, drag it, pop it next door to there, and then change it to a stacked column with a line, this option here. So duplicate your visual, like your table, and then change it to another visual. Saves you a lot of time. And then I'll stretch it out. And as far as changing the appearance, what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to change sales diff year on year to be a y-axis, sales diff year on year to be the y, which is correct, and sales last year to be also a y. Sales and sales, so that's already there. And then sales diff. So I've actually got what I want. So that's exactly, but I actually want to see the sales difference as a line. So I drag that and I drop that into that bucket there. And so my sales difference is showing as a line. So year-on-year comparison is very, very helpful. Join me for the next video. Now practice what you've learned, absorb what we've covered, and I'll see you in the next video.